What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Dan Hooker response to Dustin Poirier's BMF tournament. Over the past week, there's been quite a bit of talk regarding a potential BMF tournament with Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Dan Hooker, and Max Holloway. While Holloway, the reigning BMF, is gearing up for his featherweight title fight against Ilia Topuria, talk of a four-man tournament has been gaining momentum. Earlier in the week, Dustin Poirier expressed an interest in a one-night BMF tournament. The way Dan Hooker sees things, however, a one-night BMF tournament would be like getting into two car crashes in the same day. During a recent interview with the Mac Life, the Hangman spoke about the idea. Yeah, it's a great idea, and one night, it's like getting into two car crashes in the same day. Like, you don't really want to do that. I would do it. We're having a crazy off. I'm probably gonna win that. I'll do it. Don't get me wrong. Don't get in a crazy off with me. I will out-crazy anyone. How crazy? Anyone? Did you see? Of course, given that athletic commissions require fighters to undergo pre-fight medical screenings before they step into the octagon, a one-night tournament is incredibly unlikely. Despite that, with both Hooker and Poirier down for a BMF tournament, it sounds as though there is a chance we may finally get to see a rematch between the two fan favorites. In addition, Justin Gaethje is also looking to return to action after being finished by Max Holloway at UFC 300, which could lead to a trilogy fight between him and Poirier, or a clash between him and Hooker. With plenty of options on the table for the UFC, it sounds as though it's only a matter of time before a potential fight between two of the fighters is finalized. Bo Nickal gives his plan for the UFC title. Since making his UFC debut back in March of 2023, following two victories on Dana White's Contender Series, the previous year, Bo Nickal has won 3 straight fights, defeating Jamie Pickett and Val Woodburn in 2023, before then picking up a win over Cody Brundage at UFC 300. While Nickal has emerged from all 3 of his UFC bouts largely unscathed, his upcoming UFC 309 scrap with Paul Craig could prove to be the toughest test of his professional career. During a recent video for his YouTube channel, Nickal spoke about his future, outlining a 5-fight plan to get into title contention.
And I want to do like 2 more guys that are unranked, then fight a ranked guy. So at that point, I'll be 7-0, 8-0, 9-0, fight a ranked guy, 10-0, 11-0, probably fight a top 5 guy, and then fight for the belt around 12-0. That's like what I'm planning on right now. So we'll see, but definitely zoom focused on this next fight. I haven't even really like talked a lot of names, but you know.
While Nickal is riding a 3-fight win streak into the November 16th fight, Paul Craig will be looking to snap a 2-fight skid that most recently saw him finished by Caio Borralho back in May at UFC 301. With fight night just over a month away, the stakes are at an all-time high for both men. In the case of Nickal, a win would likely land him just outside of the top 15, setting the stage for a fight with another unranked opponent early next year. Khalil Rountree praises Alex Pereira after UFC 307. Following a hard-fought fight against Alex Pereira in Salt Lake City, Utah, Khalil Rountree has nothing but respect for the champion. During a recent appearance on Kamaru Usman and Henry Cejudo's Pound for Pound podcast this week, Rountree spoke about the fight, opening up on the thing that surprised him the most about Pereira throughout the fight. I think one thing that's pretty underrated, and I got to experience for myself, is really his IQ. The ability to mix up the strategy mid-fight and between rounds. He just kept making adjustments, and I think he made very smart adjustments. I'd say the biggest surprise for me was the intelligence. As stoic as he is, and kind of stone-faced, I do think he's got a smart brain, that's for sure. In addition, Rountree also weighed in on the pound-for-pound debate. While Islam Makhachev is sitting as the top-ranked pound-for-pound fighter on UFC.com, and Dana White believes that Jon Jones is the pound-for-pound king, Rountree thinks that Pereira deserves to sit atop the pound-for-pound ladder. I personally would also have to say Alex. The only other person that I would say, and we'll find out later on in the year, would be Jon Jones. But it's been so long since we've seen Jones fight, and I'm excited to see what version of Jones we get later on. But right now, just based off of what I've seen, based off of performances, level of opponents, things like that, I'd say right now for me it would be Alex. While Rountree is facing a layoff after undergoing nose surgery, he has his sights set on a fight with Jamal Hill once he's ready to return to action. UFC updates. Heading into this weekend's UFC Fight Night, Royval vs. Taita card, let's take a look at today's UFC fight updates, starting with a featherweight showdown between Jack Shore and Youssef Zalal, scheduled for UFC Fight Night Edmonton on November 2nd. Shore will look to bounce back from a loss to Joe Anderson Brito, while Zalal will look to build on a 2-fight victory streak since returning to the octagon in 2023. In addition, a featherweight bout between David Onama and Lucas Almeida is reportedly set for UFC 309 on November 16th. Onama will look to build on a 2-fight winning streak that recently saw him defeat Jonathan Pierce. Meanwhile, Almeida will look to build on a win over Timmy Kawamba back in June. Last but not least, Tatiana Suarez and Virna Jandiroba are set to compete in a strawweight bout at UFC 310 on December 7th. Suarez will look to extend her undefeated streak in search of a title shot, while Jandiroba looks to build on a 4-fight win streak that's seen her go 2-0 this year. We also have a UFC roster update, courtesy of the UFC roster tracker, which revealed that UFC veteran Brian Kelleher has been removed from the promotion's active roster. Kelleher was recently submitted by Cody Gibson over the summer, marking his 4th straight defeat, the longest losing streak of his career. Michael Chandler reacts to Conor McGregor interview. Since withdrawing from his highly anticipated UFC 303 headliner against Michael Chandler, there's been little news as to when Conor McGregor will return to the octagon. After Dana White revealed earlier in the week that he has not met with McGregor, the former champ spoke about his future plans in an interview with The Schmo, where he explained that he and Michael Chandler have unfinished beef. We're looking for the date, hopefully. I'd like to square it away with Michael Chandler. You know, I'd like to get Chandler in. We've had our beef, it's not settled, he has a match scheduled. I'd like to fight maybe before that, or before he's recovered or whatnot. So there's a few names in the line at the moment. There's a few names being discussed. Chandler then responded to the clip, writing, "We will settle it. Unfinished business." While McGregor wants to compete before Chandler is recovered from his UFC 309 bout with Charles Oliveira, it sounds as though Dana White is in no rush to book his long-awaited return. Glover Teixeira returning to the UFC? Although Glover Teixeira is preparing to turn 45 years old later this month, the former light heavyweight champ opened the door to a potential return to action during an interview with MMA Fighting this week. As he explained, while training with top-ranked fighters like Alex Pereira and Strickland, he's coming to the conclusion that whether he returns to the octagon or jiu-jitsu competition, he's eager to return to active competition. There's nothing booked, but I'll definitely go back to competition. I keep going after challenges. It's hard to stay training with no reason why, so I'll definitely do something. I want to compete. I'll do some jiu-jitsu. I want to do, I don't know, maybe boxing, or even go back for some fights in the UFC. That's gotta be it, because it's hard, man. I'm feeling great, fighting hard with the guys in the gym. I've rolled with some wrestlers, training with Strickland and Poatan. I was doing some light sparring with Poatan the other day, and he's like, "F, Glover, you have to come back." Teixeira has not competed since January 2023, when he dropped the decision to Jamal Hill at UFC 283, following a submission loss to Yuri Prohaska at UFC 275. While he's coming up on 2 years since stepping away from the octagon, it sounds like the former champion could look to ease into active competition again with a jiu-jitsu match, while mulling over a return to the octagon. Jorge Masvidal plans to return in March 2025. After losing his highly anticipated rematch to Nate Diaz in boxing, Jorge Masvidal set his sights on a return to MMA. As he indicated earlier in this month, he could be ready to compete as soon as December. However, a 2025 return is more likely. During a recent appearance on Bo Nickal's YouTube channel, Masvidal opened up on his return plans, revealing that he's now targeting a fight in March.
Next year, March.
Let's go.
Next year, March.
March is always a big card, so.
Yeah, next year, March. If they go to Miami, I'm going to somebody up in Miami.
Is it in Miami,
I don't
potentially?
know.
They're due for another one in Miami.
Right?
So.
But if they do, they're going to have me on that
They
gate.
got it now.
Despite Masvidal's plans to return to the UFC, Dana White was recently asked about the situation following Tuesday's episode of Dana White's Contender Series. As he explained, Masvidal and Tyron Woodley are unlikely to return to the octagon.
Jorge Masvidal, Tyron Woodley's names keep coming up, YouTube interviews, social media. Any chance they end up back in the octagon, or probably not?
Probably not.
Despite that, as members of the MMA community were quick to point out, Conor McGregor is also looking to return in the new year as well, which could open up the door for a fight between the two. Concerns rise for the new UFC gloves after a fan called the UFC out for the knockout rate with them. According to the data this person collected, we've seen an increase in decisions and a decrease in knockouts. He said, over the last 3 years, the knockouts to decision rate has been fairly consistent. 2023, 48.7 decision, 31.4% KO. 2022, 46.6% decision, 33.6% KO. 2021, 51.2% decision, 33.9% KO. Since switching to the new gloves on UFC 302, June of 2024, we've seen a significant increase in decisions and decrease in knockouts. Since May 2024, 60.3% decision, 22.9% KO. But what about the early part of 2024 with the old gloves? It was consistent with the past 3 years. Jan to May 2024, old gloves, 51.6% decision, 32.4% KO. To summarize, since switching to the new gloves, UFC fights have seen an 11.5% increase in fights going to decision compared to the prior 3-year average, and a 10% decrease in fights ending by knockout compared to the previous 3-year average. Yes, this isn't the large sample size, but when you compare the 179 fights with the new gloves to the 207 fights with the old gloves in 2024, you can still see a 9% increase in decisions and 10% decrease in knockouts. Sean Strickland gets roasted for a new photo that emerged showing Strickland looking a bit awkward to say the least. Here's what the community had to say. Jesus Christ, I didn't know Strickland and Carwin had this type of relationship. Is this picture real? I tested it through various apps and none says AI. If this was any other fighter, Strickland would be ripping them up. Well, one is Strickland, looking sus as hell. LMFAO, DDP gonna pull this up the first time Strickland calls him a rematch. Strickland will cry again. That's Sean Strickland when his daddy was fiddling with him. Top comments. Not a big fan of Ilya, but Max said it himself, the talk is confidence. Champs, undefeated ones, are meant to feel like this, lol. People getting butthurt over a guy who's communicating in like his fourth language. I think Charles Oliveira should be in that tournament, has beaten almost of them, and is one of the baddest dudes walking at that weight. Saying Poirier and Gaethje doesn't deserve to be in BMF, but Dan deserves with all his easy losses is crazy. These two deserve more than anyone else. Nate Diaz is so washed. The only fighter that makes sense for him is DP or Conor. But if I was Dana, I wouldn't even let him fight in the UFC. He embarrassed the UFC by losing to Jake Paul.